Okay. Oh, hey everybody, how we all doing today? Happy Shanksgiving to one and all. You thought I was going to forget about it this year, didn't you? Oh no, I would never forget about Shanksgiving, the greatest holiday on the One Piece calendar. The day where we could set aside our differences, we all come together and hold hands and just thank Oda that Shanks is finally doing stuff in the One Piece story. It's a beautiful, beautiful time of year. And in fact, this year is even more special because Shanks has rightfully finally made me his personal secretary. So I gotta keep track of all of his worldly affairs. I gotta make sure to polish Griffin to make sure it's nice and Kamusari ready. I gotta alphabetize all of his alcohol. Shanks actually drinks a lot of alcohol. Like, I saw the room on the Red Force. Like, Shanks took me behind the curtain, and he was like, all right, this is the place where we keep all of the booze. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of booze. But after all, you are a Yonko. You know, there's a lot. I'm sure Lucky Roo drinks a lot. And he's like, wait, no. Sorry. This is my personal booze closet. Here's where we keep all the actual booze. And it was way smaller. There's like really not that many other people on the Red Force that drink. Shanks has a serious alcohol problem, ladies and gentlemen. I think we should do an intervention or something, honestly, at some point. But anyway, I'm also in charge of his schedule. All right. So Shanks just gave me this, and I have to move it around. Okay. So let's go through this here. All right. Go to a wedding. He already did that. He already went to the wedding. He didn't know exactly who the wedding was for. He was pretty drunk when he went. But you know, Shanks showing up at your wedding. He didn't even bring a gift, which. Okay, that's a little bit. He didn't even bring a card. He was like, I am the present. And it's like, okay, yeah, you kind of are, but still, a little bit of rudeness. Meet the Gorosei, you know, he did that. He put the cloak on. He was fairly sober for that one. He stopped by at Wano. He stopped there. He made Aramaki piss his pants. You know, that was a fun time. Now, this is where the schedule gets a little bit messed up, because right after Wano, Shanks was like, we should probably go deal with this Bartolomeo situation, right? And I assumed, like, you were going to go do that, like, right after Wano, but that's not actually what happened. So instead, he picked up Marco, and he went to go drop him off at Sphinx, and he asked him to join the crew, and Marco was like, nah, I don't really want to deal with that. It was probably because of the drinking, I'm gonna say. But anyway, dropped Marco off at Sphinx, okay, and then he went to ELBAPH, and I was like, do you not want to deal with this Bartolomeo situation? It's happening. And he's like, yeah, man, I'll get to it, man. Just don't worry about it. What are you, my secretary? I'm like, yeah, you made me your secretary. We should go deal with this. Don't worry about it, man. So we just stopped at ELBAPH for a drink, you know, so we got more drunk there. And then, you know, Eustace Kid showed up, and, you know, we had the whole situation there that was kind of rough for you know, well, Kid's crew it was. I mean, it wasn't really rough for Shanks, you know, but yeah, it was actually really impressive to witness that in person. Shanks, you know, slicing an entire railgun in half, and then Dorian Broggy blowing up a giant ship. That was something that'll be, you know, in, you know, the memory chest forever. And then finally, I guess now, then he finally went to go deal with the Bartolomeo situation, right? Then he finally was like, all right, fine, I'll deal with this. So we went over there, and then we did the whole poison thing, and then Bartolomeo was like, okay, I'm gonna drink this poison, I'm not gonna kill Luffy, and then he left. And then, okay, everybody wants to know what was going on with the whole Yasop thing. Like, did Yasop shoot the going Luffy senpai of his own volition, or did Shanks decide? I gotta be honest with you guys, Shanks does not keep a really strong rein on his crew. Shanks is really this laissez-faire kind of captain. I mean, it's impressive seeing him in action, don't get me wrong. But, like, I'm looking at this whole situation, you'd think he'd be, like, really professional as a Yonko. Man, it's all freaking, it's a mess. It's a mess on that ship, to be honest with you, okay? Yeah, and then finally, I guess, find the One Piece, which, why not, right? Like, yeah, we're gonna go do that next, so find the One Piece. All right, so, all jokes aside, where is Shanks right now? Is he lost? I think he kind of is, all right? So, he was at ELBAPH, right? And then the whole thing was, I did in fact think that the whole Bartolomeo situation was before that, because he said specifically at the end of Wano, we're going to go deal with the Bartolomeo situation, right? No. So apparently, no. That happened after Egghead, after Vegapunk's message, is when he finally went to go deal with Bartolomeo. So that just happened. All right, that was like the last thing that we know that Shanks did was he was, dealing with Bartolomeo, okay? But the Straw Hats are also on Elbaph right now. And there's a lot of information being dropped by Loki involving, Shanks and stuff. Like, hey, 6 years ago, I was chained to this giant tree. And also 6 years ago, coincidentally, is when Shanks became a Yonko. So there's a lineup there somewhere. And then also Loki personally knows Shanks because he was taunting Luffy about him a little bit. He's like, oh, this Straw Hat kid knows Shanks. All right, Shanks is a coward. He's a yellow-bellied coward. And then that's like, Luffy is just like, how dare you? And he almost punches Loki in the face. And he's like, whoa, I was kidding. He's a man among men. He's the most courageous dude ever. He's awesome. He's great. I just wanted to piss you off. I was like, honestly, that was Loki just kind of testing the waters to see how he could, manipulate Luffy to the point where he would go up, get the key, and then free him from the tree, right? Of course. So from that exchange, it's very clear Loki and Shanks had an interaction. Probably part of the reason why Loki is chained up to the tree involves Shanks in some way. So it's like, great. Final saga of One Piece. We're in Elbaph right now. People have been theorizing for years that Shanks has something in, connection with Elbaph, and he clearly does. So it's like, great, let's have Shanks in this arc. Well, he just left, all right? He just left. So honestly, at this point, yes, I think Shanks is going to have to show up at Elbaph at some point, all right? Especially since we kind of just teased this at Wano, Shanks was showing up at Wano. It's like, oh my god, is Luffy going to be reunited with Shanks? Is Usopp going to meet each other here at Wano? And, Usopp was having a bit of a panic attack, and eventually Shanks decided not to. He's just like, I just wanted to swing by really quick, pick up Marco, and then just get out of here, right? Okay? So that was teased already. And, I don't know, at this part in the story, I feel like Oda will tease something and then maybe establish it in a story arc or two after that. There's really not a lot of, setup in the sense of, yeah, Shanks and Luffy will meet again in about 12 more years, I just don't think, we don't have that much time left, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I guess having Shanks there on Elbaph when the Straw Hats arrived, that might be a little bit too much. That might be, a lot to just, show up at Elbaph and be like, yeah, Shanks is up in the castle sitting on the throne. Maybe Shanks is the king of Elbaph. Actually, you know what? We were kind of wondering about that because King Harald had died, right? He was purportedly killed by Loki, which I'm thinking Loki did kill him, but the whole circumstances behind that, the context is probably warped in a way. We'll find out that, Loki had to kill him for some reason. King Harald might have been a really bad guy or something like that. But it was the question of, okay, well, if Hiruden and Loki are his children, obviously it's not going to be Loki as the next king, and Hiruden is clearly not the king. I guess there could be other children as well. Who is protecting Elbaph? Or who's the king of Elbaph? I guess the easiest solution to that would just be Shanks, right? He's a Yonko. He can plant his flag and be like, I will do this. But then again, that also doesn't make a lot of sense because, that's one thing to be like, I am the ruling, monarch of a particular island, and then a Yonko that just lays down their flag there, protecting it. Look at Fishman Island, right? Whitebeard had put his flag there for years and hey, don't mess with this island, but he wasn't the ruler of the island. Neptune was still the ruler, right? So now, I mean, yeah, sure, I think maybe Shanks could have his flag around at various locations, it's not allied with the world government anyway, but nobody's gonna mess with it because the giants are so damn strong. But if anybody were to mess with it, if anybody did decide to go there and mess with Elbaph directly, because Big Mom especially had thought about it a few times. Big Mom probably had a few plans in Whole Cake Chateau on invading Elbaph and taking that place over and trying to enlist, get the giants on her side, right? Shanks is involved with that, so I don't know. It's a little bit of a sticky situation to deal with that. Plus, the giant army is really strong as well. So, yeah, but at any rate, where is Shanks right now, and is he going to be coming back? Is he going to meander his way back to Elbaph at some point, right? I think so. It might be at the end. It might be a Film Red type situation. Actually, Film Red, we're going to loop back to that a little bit in a second here. But it might be that. It might be oh yeah, Film Red, it's all about Shanks. Shanks shows up in, the last quarter of the movie, And even then, you know, it's split between Luffy's group in the Uta world and then Shanks in the real world, right? So we didn't get as much Shanks as I thought we were going to get in that movie, but we did get some Shanks. All right, so it might be like, okay, we're in Elbaph, the big bad happens, it's probably not going to be Loki, and then, you know, the Straw Hats are kind of like, oh, I don't know, this is like really dangerous, and then that's when Shanks shows up at the very end. Maybe we'll have a cool scene of, because we got to see at some point in the manga, we got to see Shanks and Luffy, like, fighting side by side. Okay, like they did in the movie. And a lot of times when we do get the movies, stuff will happen shortly thereafter in the manga. I mean, shortly thereafter, the movie came out in, like, 2022. But, like, shortly thereafter, we'll get stuff in the manga that relates back to the movie. Stampede was basically, like Bullet was a prototype of Kaido, essentially. When we learned about Kaido's backstory, it was essentially the same thing as Bullet, okay? So it's totally possible that we might see Luffy and Shanks fight side by side here in Elbaph. And then going into the further final arcs, you know, there'll be a situation where maybe the Straw Hats and the Red Hair Pirates have to clash in terms of like a Davy back or something like that, right? Leading up, of course, ultimately to Blackbeard killing Shanks. Dude, can you imagine if we do a Davy back again and it's like kind of like it's the last arc of One Piece that's just for funsies? Because, you know, I shit on the Davy back fight because of Foxy's involvement, but I liked the concept of the Davy back as a nice little break from the intensities of Alabasta and then following that up immediately with Skypiea. It was nice to have a little chill out arc before we moved into the Enies Lobby saga with, you know, everything there, okay? So, dude, we might have that. We might have a really intense arc at Elbaph. And then Shanks' crew and the Straw Hats go do a Davy back in the next arc that's kind of just fun. And then at the end of that arc, Blackbeard shows up like he does, because that's what Blackbeard does. That's his MO. He waits until the end of an event, and then he shows up and does something crazy, right? So then Blackbeard shows up, and then Shanks has to be like, Luffy, get your crew and get out of here. But Shanks, I'll fight with you. No, Luffy, I gave you the Straw Hat. You're going to carry out Roger's will. You're going to be the one to find the One Piece. You've already become a great pirate. Don't worry about it. But no, after I become a great pirate, I have to give you my hat back. It's like, no, Luffy, that hat, I don't think I'm going to need it anymore. And then Blackbeard and Shanks fight, and that would be actually perfect to do it that way, because we would get a little bit of Shanks' abilities we already have, like the Kamusari, but if like Shanks and Luffy fought side by side at Elbaph, that would be something, and then Davy back right after that, we get to see more of Shanks' crew in the dynamic, and then immediately after that, we have Shanks die. Okay, and then, you know, after that, the Straw Hats could go to Lodestar or Laugh Tale and be like, Shanks, no! You know, and then there it is, right? And then Blackbeard really cements himself as like, I am the final villain, say ha ha ha. And then Eam enters the chat. You thought you were the final villain? I was the final villain. Eam, Eam, Eam. That's Eam's laugh. I don't think we know Eam's laugh yet. At any rate, that's just some headcanon, you know, theory bullshit. I don't know. It sounds like a cool progression of events. But anyway, winding it back a little bit, I did want to go through this checklist here to kind of cover all the places Shanks has been and all the things he's done. Since the time skip, really. I mean, like, the first time we really get to see Shanks at all post-time skip is, like, it was, like, right after Dressrosa, or, like, during Dressrosa, back in, like, 2016 in the manga. That was when we got the cover story with him at the wedding. He was in some, like, desert country. There was, like, cacti and stuff, and there was, like, an Old West kind of chapel in the background, and they were at a wedding, and that was it. And we don't know who was getting married. Could it have been Uta? Okay, I bring this up just because, and you might say, like, nah, this was way before Film Red. This was, you know, Film Red was in 2022 is when it was released, and it was in production for a few years before that, but this was way back in 2016. I mean, like, it's very possible that Shanks, like, Oda came up with the idea of Shanks having a daughter early on, maybe, and like, oh yeah, maybe Shanks will have a daughter, and maybe that couldn't get, like, expanded as much as it could have been, because Oda always admits to, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff in this story that eventually ends up on the cutting room floor, as it were, that I had stuff written for it, I had my notes, but it just never got to the point where it was fleshed out as much as I would have wanted to. And then in that case, it's like, hey, new One Piece movie's coming out, what's it gonna be about? And Oda's like, well, you know what? I have it in the story that Shanks has a daughter. Her name is Uta. I'm probably never going to have a point in the story to really, like, have an entire arc focused on her or anything like that. So, you know what? Let's just do that, right? And the events of the film, One Piece Film Red, are non-canon. But Uta's existence is. We see her as a silhouette in the manga when Shanks arrives at Wano. Now, you could say, well, that was just put there because the movie was coming out while those chapters were coming out, and that was just Oda's example of a little tie-in. No. That's not how this works. You know, because we had the situation with Shiki. You know, Shiki was mentioned in the manga, and now he is finally, like, well after a decade after Strong World came out, Shiki might be possibly showing up. I mean, Shiki, we've definitely seen him during, like, God Valley flashback and stuff, so he is part of the manga, right? You know, whether or not he's going to be at ELBAPH, and I mean, I think he's probably the dude drinking on the shore. I mean, that makes sense, right, that he would be that. You know, and there's also a lot of Strong World animals on ELBAPH, so Shiki showing up here would actually make a lot of sense, right? Okay, might not be the same kind of Shiki we've seen in Strong World. He might not have, you know, the steering wheel in his head or anything like that, but it might be a different kind of, you know, design of Shiki, and his personality might be a little different, but overall, I mean, he'll still be Shiki, right? And then, you know, might have this with Shanks and Uta and the flashback and everything. The events of the movie did not happen with Uta doing the concert and everything. But in terms of Uta, you know, being adopted by Shanks, being found in the treasure chest, left on Elgia, and then maybe that was where the wedding was. Maybe the wedding was Elgia. Maybe Shanks heard that, like, oh yeah, I had to leave my daughter there because, you know, I'm going to be a Yonko and it's really dangerous and yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, but in this version of events, Shanks actually stays in contact with Uta, while in the movie, Shanks just didn't. He just didn't. He was just like, yeah, I can never send her a message, I can never talk to her again until she's right about to die, and drag the whole world into her dream realm. That's when Shanks shows up, right? So in this version, in the manga, Shanks is a little bit of a better dad, all right? So maybe Uta was getting married, and Shanks and the red-haired pirates showed up to celebrate. Maybe that's, instead of a funeral at the end of Film Red, it's a wedding here. Okay. Next up, the next time we see Shanks in the story, he's meeting the Gorosei. Now, a lot of people might bring up, by the way, if this is all Shanks, man, he is moving around the Grand Line and the New World and all that stuff. Up Marijois, down, over to ELBAPH, over here to Gartel Island. He's moving all over the place, all right? He's got that fast travel cheat unlocked. I mean, I guess when you reach a certain level of hockey, you unlock fast travel hockey. That's just how it goes, right? Where do you want to travel? Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Marijois. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. You know, that's just how it works, right? Okay, so people might say, is that really Shanks that met with the Gorosei? Or was it Shanks's hot brother? Dun, dun, dun. All right. This is a point of, I think you can kind of go either way with it. I did immediately think that it might have been a member of the Gods Knights, but now that I'm really kind of looking at it, I do think it was actually Shanks. I do think it was actually Shanks. Now, we did not see the side of his face that had the scar. I'll get back to that in a moment. The one thing that bothers me about it is the Gods Knights are super high ranked, right? Like, it's basically the Gods Knights and then the Supreme Commander of the Gods Knights, which was Garling. I'm assuming the silhouetted figure that resembles Shanks in that chapter where we're like, oh, who's going to get the One Piece? And there was like 12 characters. I'm assuming that character is Garling's other son that might be Shanks' brother or hot sister, whatever. And then that character is going to be the new Supreme Commander of the Gods Knights, as Garling has been promoted to a Gorosei, right? My point is, the Gorosei and the Gods Knights, they're clearly not on equal keel. Like, you know, when Garling walked in the room of authority, the Gorosei there were like, what the hell are you doing in here, Garling? You know, remember your place. Making it very clear that, like, yeah, you might be higher ranked than the other Tenryubito, but you're not on our level. And then Garling's like, actually, I am, right? So, even though they're not on the same level, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for a member of the Gods Knights to dress in a cloak and mysteriously, like, sneak around Marijois and into the castle of Pangaea, which would be where they would probably be living anyway, and then meeting, you know, in a secret way with the Gorosei. Like, you know, in the Gorosei turn, he's like, we wouldn't usually have this meeting with you, but considering your station, I suppose we made time. it doesn't make much sense. If a member of the Gods Knights wanted to meet with the Gorosei, I'm not saying they can just barge into the room whenever they wanted. But they could probably make a fucking appointment. You know what I mean? They could probably be like, hey, Garling of the Gods Knights wants an appointment with the Gorosei. I'm sure the Gorosei would be like, yeah, all right, we'll have a meeting with him. The Gorosei have met with Sakazuki before, who's the fleet admiral. If Sakazuki can get an appointment with the Gorosei, then if the dude in the cloak was a member of the Gods Knights, this guy doesn't need to make a secret, foray into this. He could just next Tuesday we're free. It's like, all right, there you go, right? Now, it makes more sense now that we know that Shanks is a member of the Figarland family and is most likely Garling's son. And it's like, okay, we normally would never meet with a pirate, certainly never meet with a Yonko, but you have an interesting, family tree, family relation, because you are a member of the Figarland family. So for you, we will allow that, okay? And then Shanks was like, I need to talk about a certain pirate. But we never see the half of his face that has the scar. What if, and I think Oda might do this more often than we all might think, Oda purposely did not show the scar because he hadn't decided yet on whether or not that was actually Shanks or Shanks' brother. What if Oda was drawing that scene and he was like, I could either spin this that's actually Shanks or that's Shanks' twin brother that we didn't know about at this point. And maybe Oda was like, I'll just do this. So if I wanted to, I could, deviate one way or the other. I'd say that's the mark of a good author. The idea of, leaving things, set, but also up for interpretation. He could still go one way or the other with it and perfectly fine regardless. He hadn't made up his mind yet, but he could, this way or that way. It doesn't matter. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I do think it was, as of right now, I think it was still Shanks that met with the Gorosei there. Okay, so then he went from, Marijois all the way to Wano, and, there's timelines and all this, for example, Wano, actually, somebody should break down the timelines for all this. Artor, that seems like something Artor could do, and figure out, how fast that Shanks has to be traveling through the new world. A lot of time passed during Wano because we had the Fire Festival and the Straw Hats were there for several weeks and everything like that. And for a lot of Shanks' stuff, too, we know, the relative time frame where we're at. It took place after Dressrosa, but before Wano. But we don't know the exact. I mean, during this, we know it took place at Reverie, and then Reverie was, during the beginning of Wano, and then several weeks went by through Wano, and then getting to the raid on Onigashima, and then there was time after the raid of Onigashima, another week. So, I guess maybe Shanks, he maybe traveled faster than the average pirate crew, but he managed to get from Marijois all the way to Wano, and then he, did the burst of conquerors. Aramaki pissed himself, and then he left, and then he went all the way over to Sphinx, which Sphinx is not far from Wano. In fact, from what we know when Nekomamushi visited it, Sphinx is right next to Wano, probably. So, Shanks, took the Red Force and popped a Yui around Wano, and then went to Sphinx, dropped off Marco, and then all right, let's get back. And then he, went around Wano again and went to ELBAPH afterwards, had the drink, met Dorian Bragi, wiped out Kid's crew, and then went to Gartel Island. No idea where Gartel Island is. Bartolomeo went to Gartel, I guess, pretty much after he dropped off the Straw Hats at Zoe. See, that's the thing what I mean, because ELBAPH is after Egghead, which is after Wano, and Sphinx is before Wano. So Shanks went Wano, Sphinx, all the way over to ELBAPH, and then all the way over to some other region where Gartel was. Also listened to Vegapunk's message along the way there, and he was drinking again while he was listening to that, right? Okay, and then after that, after Gartel, we don't know where he's at right now. So I guess if he did double back to that region where Bartolomeo was at, which would have definitely been before ELBAPH, I guess he could travel back again. And then also that's the fact that, after Wano, as they were leaving, that was when Shanks also said to Ben Beckman, hey, Beck, I think it's finally time we go after the One Piece. And he's like, what, seriously? Well, we got to make a couple of detours first. Actually, a lot of detours. But after that, One Piece, for sure. almost knocked a bottle over. Look. After that, we'll go after the One Piece. It's like, all right, cool. So, I don't know if Shanks is going to do that in the sense of like, all right, Luffy, let's say he does arrive at Elbaph and they do have a moment together and they do fight. And then Shanks is like, all right, Luffy, here's the deal. After we leave Elbaph, I'm going straight for the One Piece. And Luffy's like, what? And he's like, yeah. Unless you defeat us in a Davy back. We'll do a Davy back with you. Maybe we'll find an eye. Maybe that's what Lodestar will be about. I've been kind of struggling to figure out what the Lodestar arc was going to be. Because Lodestar, we know it's there. We know it's the end of the log pose route, and we know the Straw Hats are probably going to go there. It'd be weird to skip over it. Like, that's the end of their journey in the sense of the log pose journey. After that, it's all about the poneglyphs and the road poneglyphs pointing to Laugh Tale, right? So I was like, okay, well, what's going to be on Lodestar? I mean, Lodestar is normally the place you find out about the road poneglyphs, so there's got to be something there involving that, but like, what would the story arc be? I think Elbaph's going to be a little longer than people are going to think, but I think Lodestar wouldn't be a particularly long arc if we did go there. But I feel like we have to, right? So maybe that'll be what Lodestar is. Lodestar is a Davy backfight between the Red Hair Pirates, Shanks, and then the Straw Hat Pirates with Luffy as their captain, and we'll see what happens there. And then maybe Blackbeard gets involved at the end, and then after that, it really is just go to Laugh Tale. Now, whether or not Laugh Tale is like right after Lodestar or they have to double back through somewhere else in the Grand Line, that's up for debate. People have even said maybe Laugh Tale's not even in the Grand Line. Maybe it's in like one of the Four Blues. I don't think it's in one of the Four Blues. I think it is in the Grand Line. I think it is in the New World. But it might not be right at the end. It might be at some other location that they just haven't found yet. It might be hidden in some way. It's like a Mirage Island or something like that. And then that's where the Laugh Tale arc will take place, this big epic final war that's been hyped up for so long. And then we'll have some other stuff afterwards, and then maybe an epilogue, and then that's the story, right? But at any rate, that was Shanksgiving this year. That was Shanksgiving. We talked a little bit about Shanks going to Elbaph and where all the places he's been since, and just traveling around the world. But hey, when you're a free Yonko, when you're a free pirate, you got to enjoy that salty sea breeze. You're out there on the high seas, getting drunk on Captain Morgan, and that's living for Shanks, right? He doesn't stay in one place for too long. That's how it goes. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. All right, we're not done yet. We still have tree facts. Man, how could I forget? I wrote all this stuff down. All right, tree facts. Letter C. Letter C. What's a pirate's favorite letter? I kind of already gave it away, but most people would say R. But no, the sea be his first love. There it is. Okay, letter C. We're going to be talking about the cherry trees. Yeah, for tree facts today. All right. So the cherry tree, famously the tree that the founder of everything America, George Washington, cut down as a child and therefore could not lie. He's like, Father, I cannot tell a lie. I cut down this tree with my mighty hatchet imbued with armament and conqueror's hockey, and I founded America on this spot right here. That is basically the story that I was taught when I was in elementary school, by the way. We build George Washington up to be a crazy mythical figure in the United States of America. Like, growing up especially, I was taught he was basically a fucking demigod, all right? Anyway, before we get into the tree facts, I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit here, okay? For no reason whatsoever, go watch the last episode of Isekai D&D. Out of respect for George Washington. All right, so there was a dude named Mason Locke Weems. Weems! And he was the dude that decided, wow, George Washington's a really, like, amazing general and everything, right? First president of the United States. I'm going to write a biography about him, but I'm just going to write him in there like he is a mythical figure. And he did. He wrote a biography about George Washington that included all of these stories. The cherry tree story just being one of them that can neither be proved nor disproved. But it's the same kind of vein of like, hey, there was, let's say there's a really kindly priest in our town, and he died. And it's like, well, everybody loved this priest, so let's write a book about how awesome he was. And you just include a bunch of crazy shit in the book. Like, he was able to heal the sick. He cured over 700 people with just his hands, you know, and he could personally commune with God. And there's like all this crazy stuff you throw in the book. That was basically what this Mason Locke Weems dude did for George Washington. All right. And so I think that's the reason why growing up here, we learn about that guy. Like, man, I'm not even kidding you. We literally learned essentially growing up, my perspective was like, this was the most perfect man that ever lived. He never had any faults. There was nothing negative that could even be said about him. That was the way George Washington was impressed in me, and this Mason Locke Weems dude is the reason for that. So whatever. There's the context for the cherry tree story. But anyway, moving on to the actual botany of this. So there's two basic types of cherry trees, right? There's ornamental, and then there's the fruit-bearing cherry trees, okay? Part of the genus Prunus. So the ornamental ones, you're probably very familiar with that if you like anime. It's the sakura trees. So if you go to Japan or Washington, D.C., because there's a lot of cherry blossom trees, there's a festival there in April. Those are the blossoming floral kind of, cherry trees, right? Because they're called cherry blossoms, right? And you see them, and they're nice. They're usually pink or white. Sometimes there's some species that are red or even yellow. But yeah, they don't actually produce like cherries that you eat, okay? There's like a flowering type of tree. But they represent transience and beauty, like a fleeting kind of beauty, because they don't last very long in particular, like appearance just for a slight amount of time, and then they wilt, okay? So then there is the fruit bearing, where the actual cherries come from, in which case there are sweet cherries and then there are sour cherries. Sour cherries are used in liqueurs and baking and preservatives, and the sweet cherries are meant for like normal consumption and stuff like that. When it comes to sweet cherries, Turkey, the country of Turkey, is the largest producer of sweet cherries in the world, and Russia is the largest producer of sour cherries in the world. But yeah, that's pretty much about cherries. I mean, there's a little bit more about cherry wood, like, that's a very highly prized type of wood to be used in furniture. Like, oh yeah, look at that dark cherry finished coffee table you have. I don't really particularly care about like the kind of wood that like furniture is made out of. I don't lose myself over that, but a lot of people do. Yeah. So anyway, that's cherry facts. That's cherry tree facts. There you go. Hope you enjoyed. And I hope you all have a very great Shanksgiving. Later, everyone.